with Mac while he works, and... Brandon? She waited until I inclined my head to continue speaking. I've known you for too long. Don't bother trying to pull the wool over my eyes. I don't know exactly what happened all those years ago, and I don't need to. Just be happy. If Jake and his charming dog make you happy, c'est la vie. My only word of advice is that you stop settling. Settling for what? You deserve the best. Settle for nothing less. She patted my cheek affectionately, hopped to her feet gracefully, and grabbed her gigantic Louis Vuitton bag before spinning toward the door. Wait, what do you mean? I don't settle. Did I? I felt every wrinkle in my forehead as I tried to puzzle out her meaning. You'll figure it out when you're ready. I'm off. It looks like you have company anyway. She flung the door open wide and greeted a bewildered-looking Jake with a brilliant smile. Well, hello! It's lovely to see you again, Jake. It's been too long. Come in, come in. I've met your delightful dog. He's a sweetheart. A little noisy. Mac had been a perfect gentleman during Mara's visit, but was now barking like crazy at Jake's heel. Jake absently bent to greet his dog and shush him before giving Mara a sweet, lopsided grin. Sorry about that. He gets excited. It's nice to see you again, ma'am. She let out a short laugh. Call me Mara, darling. See you soon. Goodbye, sweet Brandon. I gave Jake a sideways half-smile, chuckling at the look of confusion on his face. Luke's mom tended to leave the average person a little befuddled. Jake shot me a shy grin as he reached for me. We stood on my front porch, entangled in a sweet embrace. I brushed my cheek against his t-shirt and breathed in his familiar scent. He smelled, felt, and looked amazing. Geez, I was as bad as Mac, I thought, stepping back slightly to look down at the dog whimpering plaintively at our feet. I caught on almost immediately that something was wrong. Mac's cries were insistent, more like a whine. He was definitely trying to communicate. I looked at Jake with concern. He didn't seem bothered by the dog's anxiety at all. Jake? What's wrong with him? Why is he doing that? He pursed his lips together and lifted a corner of his mouth as though attempting to smile before deciding it wasn't worth the effort after all. Then he dropped to his knees beside the dog and hugged him fiercely. Mac's whining subsided, but he crawled into Jake as closely as possible, licking his face and neck repeatedly before calmly sitting between his legs with his chin resting on Jake's knee. The exchange was as puzzling as it was endearing. I waited for Jake to offer an explanation. He didn't. He stayed where he was for a long moment, cuddling the dog with soft pets and praise. When Jake finally stood, I was the one left feeling anxious. I bit at my bottom lip nervously and waited for him to enlighten me. Jake? I'm sorry. It's been a rough... He looked at the darkened street before turning to face me. We stared at each other in the moonlit shadows cast by the amber tree in my front yard before I took his hand and pulled him inside. I walked toward the kitchen, listening to his heavier footfall behind me and the musical jingle from Mac's collar. I poured 2 glasses of wine and handed him one. Are you okay? I kept my tone low, as if sensing a need for solemnity. I'm fine. Like I said, rough day. Thanks for taking care of... Thank me later. What is it? What happened? Why did Mac cry? Jake looked down at the adoring dog, who literally sat on his foot in a protective stance. I could have sworn there were tears in his eyes when he glanced up at me. He blinked twice, and when he looked at me again, I wasn't so sure. Something was up, though. Mac is special, Fran. He's a service dog. Or he was supposed to be, but... What do you mean? Like for visual impairment? Yes. Or hearing impairment or stress and anxiety disorders. The air was thick with the strong, unknown current I sometimes sensed between us. Sometimes it was sexual, like an energy that had never dissipated all those years ago. But this time, I couldn't begin to guess the source. I leaned against the kitchen counter and waited. He still wouldn't speak. Is there something wrong? Bran, I'm listening. He met my gaze and nodded before taking a seat at the small kitchen table. Mac resumed his place at Jake's feet. There's nothing wrong. I'm fine. But I've had issues with anxiety, and sometimes I still do. It's just been a crappy day, and... What happened? I whispered. Apartment fire. Family displaced. Everything gone. Including the 9-year-old kid's pet cat. She was devastated. So sad. He shook his head. It sucked. And Mac knew it. We both looked at the patient yellow lab, who decided it was safe to nap. He groaned and let his front paws slide in front of him as he closed his eyes. He reminds me to breathe. He calms me when he senses distress. It sounds crazy, but it's true. I didn't know any of that when I lobbied for him to come live with Sarah and me. I was trying to save a dog from the shelter. Turns out he was bred as a service dog, but failed some part of the training. Probably the part about getting into automobiles. Jake added with a small laugh. Even though he didn't pass for the big game, he made a great family dog. Little did he know he'd be put to work after all. How? Is it your work? Is it the stress, or... No, I mean... Look, sometimes my past makes it hard for me to process stress. Not in a debilitating way, but Mac helps. He swiped a hand across his jaw in frustration. That probably makes no sense. He looked down at Mac, who immediately sat up and set a paw on Jake's thigh. If the night hadn't taken this surreal twist, I would have cheered wildly at the clever dog's antics. Now I was left wondering how many times I'd misread a situation because I only looked for surface clues. I bit my lip hard as I watched them giving and taking comfort by touch. By sharing the same space, they wordlessly eased each other's pain. Jake's hand on Mac's snout and Mac's paw on his knee. So simple. And yet there was more here than met the eye. The only way for me to understand was to ask the one question I had avoided like the plague. What happened, Jake? After high school? You don't... Yes, I do. Talk to me. He cocked his head slightly and pursed his lips thoughtfully. I was a fucking mess after my family turned me away. I didn't handle it well. I was so lost and so ashamed of myself. It was really fucking scary to know for the first time ever I had no one on my side. I wallowed in self-pity and became a pretty miserable excuse for a human. The only thing that kept me going was hope. Hope they'd change their minds and we'd figure it out. Permanent excommunication? Not in a million years would I have thought it possible. I thought they'd loved me. Me. The kid they raised. The one whose games they watched rain or shine from age 5 through high school. The one they taught to ride a bike, drive a car, and show compassion and kindness to those in need. I grew up never, ever doubting I was a valuable member of a close-knit, typical, all-American family. I never doubted my place. Jake took a deep breath and stroked the dog's face lovingly. Until I came out. I didn't think they'd be happy about my revelation, but I figured they'd come around eventually. They didn't. And I didn't handle it well. At all. I didn't have a dime to my name. I had nothing. I was forced to drop out of college. but I'd never had a real job before. And it wasn't so easy to get even a poor-paying one, so I sold drugs. And did drugs. I wanted to be numb. And then, I just wanted to die. I gasped. My hands flew to my mouth. It's true. I hated me. In my 19 and 20-year-old mind, being gay was the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. I was sure of it. It was responsible for colossal loss. I lost you because I was scared. I lost my family when I thought bravery would free me. Everything important to me was gone because of this affliction, this thing inside me. I was okay when I was numb. Everything was okay. But of course it really wasn't. I felt nervous suddenly. I needed to move, to do something. I went to the sink and poured a glass of water, then set it at Jake's elbow. He smiled slightly and took my hand. He kissed it and pointed to the chair opposite him. I obeyed. I was 21, a drug addict, a dealer, and all-out failure when Nate found me in the wreck of a garage fire. I don't remember much, but the night I almost died turned out to be the night I was saved. And I don't mean from the fire. Jake paused to take a sip of water. Nate owned the apartment building, and his brother Ryan was one of the firefighters on the first response team. I was in the hospital for a week or more, and they came to visit me every day. They played a good cop, bad cop brother routine. Nate wanted to know what the fuck I was doing, squatting in the garage of his rental property, while Rye wanted to know how he could help. Every day I told him to fuck off. I wanted to die, not be saved. Jake paused and gave a humorless chuckle. Anyone else would have walked away and reminded themselves not to give two fucks the next time. But not those two. They wouldn't give up. Jake stood up suddenly and walked to the sink. He poured the water down the drain and refilled the glass. Mac watched him carefully. He didn't go after him, but he looked prepared to if he felt he was needed. Long story short, those two idiots saved me. They cared enough to see if there was anything they could do for a drug-addicted faggot with no money, no family, and no fucking clue. Jesus, I muttered. I was no overnight success story, but slowly, very slowly, I began to hope again. For me. Not for my parents' sake, but for my own. I went to rehab, got clean, and Rye got me a job. I swept floors and did basic repairs around the fire station, and a couple years after nearly dying in a blaze of no fucking glory, I passed my test and became a firefighter. That's good. It's great, actually. Yes, it is. My job has taught me more than I bargained for about respect and gratitude and acceptance. He sat down again and leaned forward with his forearms resting on his knees. It's given me a fraternity of brothers and a family of incredible friends. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a superhero. Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, take a pick. I wanted to save the world. I had those idyllic years of thinking I was invincible. When I was the star pitcher in high school, the popular kid the teachers loved and other kids wanted to be friends with. Hey, I had it all. I learned the hard way the real world doesn't play fair, and people aren't always who or what they claim to be. I also learned superheroes don't come with capes. Some come in suits, uniforms, or even covered in fur, like Mac. I aspire to be someone more than who I am, Brad. Some days, I think I'm doing great. But others, I'm reminded I'm just a man, and I can't save everything or everyone. Mac sniffed at Jake's hand, and then bumped his arm with his snout. Jake